have a really fun, exciting, uplifting, lighthearted topic this week.
Hey.
We're going to talk about death.
Oh.
Or disappearing, getting burned out, getting sued.
Well,
we're talking about
opposite day.
No, it's not. But yeah, we're going to talk about that problem with those types of problems with the person who's running your property. Today on the Furlo Capital Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the intricacies of passive real estate investing, including topics that we sometimes don't want to talk about. And our mission is to equip people to invest wisely in both property and people so that together we can build wealth while improving housing, even if someone dies in the process. I'm James, and this is my wife, Jessie.
Okay, I have something fun to talk about before we talk about death.
Let's do it.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I was trying to tie it in, but nope, doesn't have it.
I'll help you.
So I have always had a fascination. Well, I've had a fascination with bugs, but that kind of lends itself to like looking through microscopes or like inspecting things or I don't know, observing
things.
Sometimes
perhaps.
dead things are easier to observe. That's for sure.
That's true.
But yeah, so I got a microscope.
Dang.
And I've been like looking at stuff, and the kids have been looking at stuff. I've been learning about like front lighting and back lighting, getting the best dial in. That has nothing to do with anything. It's just way more fun than death.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. But
Yeah.
it is important to talk about those type of things because it can happen and it can have a significant impact on passive investors because it's because it's a single asset. And it's often not very liquid. And so you might be trapped in it where it's like, man, we're no longer getting distributions or we're not getting any answers. And oftentimes your investments depend very heavily on a key person. And so, yeah, even though we don't want to talk about it and we want to get back to the microscopes and fun things of inspecting, right now we got to inspect this really bad situation.
Yeah, my investments over there, they're fine. I'm just going to look at tiny stuff in the microscope.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about dead bugs, not dead people. I get it. So what's interesting is that there's two different scenarios really where you need to worry about this. The first one is if you are a private money lender. Essentially, you're the blender. You're the lender. You're the bank, and so you have debt on a property, or you don't have the debt. You've provided the debt for a property, and then you have the passive investor who's in a syndication. Right? They have an equity position, and those are two fundamentally different scenarios.
Yeah, let me make sure if I get my brain around it. I mean, a bank loan or like a private money lender essentially is like they gave you the money, and then
they lent you the money, but yeah.
Well, yeah, they lent you the money with some terms that you laid out in paperwork somewhere, and then you give it back to them,
regardless of the property's performance.
Right. Yes, the loan is separate. They're like, you will pay us back no matter what.
It's often
this amount with interest.
Correct.
Sure. And then the equity is dependent upon the property, I think.
Yeah. And
like the sale of the property.
And they actually have an ownership interest in the property or the LLC that owns the property.
Sure. Yeah. So it's much more tied. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can kind of see there's different risk profiles.
That's true.
With the different things. And so I actually want to run through the four scenarios of an operator, of the operator. That's the sponsor. That's the person who's running the entire investment. That's me.
Yep.
Either dying, disappearing, burning out, or getting sued. Because those are four different events that are very negative. And so we're actually going to talk about, because of the math, of how math works, 8 different scenarios. So we're going to look at all 4 from the 2 different perspectives.
Oh, I see. From the 2 different ways you could potentially put money in.
Correct. And kind of the implications and just kind of pros and cons, honestly. Like, all right. It's just like anything. All right.
We're going to start with death.
Yeah, that is my very first one. Death. Okay. So death from a private money lender, a PML perspective, if you will. I know, so fancy with my acronyms. So basically, the note survives. Nothing changes there. The deed of trust, which is the piece of paper that's officially filed with the local county saying, hey, this guy owes him money. Yeah. That, like, nothing
Still
changes there. And it's the estate that inherits the debt of whoever that borrower was. And if there's guarantors, again, the estate is still personally liable for that. Now, there are certain things where lenders, they can accelerate they can accelerate the loan being due, potentially, depending on how good you negotiate and what's written down. I don't know, parties are like, I don't know if you want to create 2 problems. But so they can say, hey, if this person dies or whatever, the note's due sooner rather than later. You could write that in. It's an option. It's usually not, but it could be.
Okay.
And honestly, this is the clear scenario for a lender because the rights don't depend on the person being alive.
So what if the person doesn't have enough in their estate to make good on the loan?
Yeah, then I guess
you
you're
don't get it?
go through the regular foreclosure process.
Oh.
Yeah, and you probably get the property at the end of the day.
Sure.
Just
That's
like
written in there, just like any loan.
Yeah. Just like if the normal person didn't have the money
Sure.
to do it. Yeah, here's the important part. It's like the borrower, whatever the borrower agreed to, whoever inherits that has also agreed to it.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's kind of how that works.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about it from a syndication LP, a limited partner perspective now. Again, they die.
Yeah.
So there's going to be an operating agreement, and this is the thing that's going to spell out everything that happens. So usually there's a key person, like and I should say there's a couple different scenarios where you have like a one-man shop, which is more like what I am, versus, hey, this is an organization that's running the investment. So two very different things. So if you have a one-man shop, which is the one, honestly, that's the scenario that we're caring about right here. You have they're known as a key person, and so you then have some options that happen there. One of the things, usually what happens is what they call a strategic pause period. So there's no capital calls. There's distributions will continue as normal unless somehow those are suspended. And so there's like, we're just going to take a pause and go, what's going on? And it's usually about 90 days for that. Now,
So no big changes in 90 days, but distributions still happen if
it's more
those
like,
were happening.
let's keep things going as normal. Let's just take a breath, figure out what the next step is instead of instantly reacting and saying, okay, I got to do all this. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Like we got to close it down or sell it or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like
let's take 3 months. Let's all
breath.
breathe, figure out what we actually want to do. Now, let's say I'm the guy. My estate has no automatic right to continue as the manager of the syndication. And so that means that the members, they got to vote. And they got those 90 days to say, hey, who do we want to be running this thing?
So essentially they vote for a new key person?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Is there anything within the paperwork where you could designate a key person ahead of time? Like
Yes.
in the event of my death, it will
Totally.
be this person.
Totally is a thing. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The other thing, which is what I've done, is you get key person insurance.
Yeah, I've heard you say that. And I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. So essentially, it's an insurance policy on my life that says if I die, my insurance company is going to just give a big chunk of money to that syndication. Because it
Just to
recognizes,
close out the account.
Well, not to close it out, but to just recognize, hey, this whole entire investment was dependent on this one person performing. They're not here anymore, so we're going to make you whole.
Interesting.
And in my case, I got out enough to pay for the loan.
Okay.
So the loan, if they wanted, that doesn't have to, but if they wanted to just pay off the loan and we go, man, we're just going to have like raking the cash flow, cool beans. That's an option. They still got to find someone to then handle
key
distributions, make decisions, that kind of stuff.
But they have the option to step out.
No. What do you mean?
Well, you said if you die and the insurance pays for stuff,
Yeah.
then one of your investors could,
in theory, could buy out other people. Yeah.
and be
I
like,
guess.
I wanted to invest if James was here, but
He's
if
not.
it's
so I
somebody
want out.
else, I
That would
want out.
require the other members to then buy out
Sure.
that person and person. Most likely scenario, what happens is you go, hey, we just need to sell this asset and sell it pretty quick. And because we're making enough money, we don't necessarily need to be greedy, and they just sell it to another organization, and then they run with it from there.
Okay.
It's sad, it's a bummer, but hey, you made some money, so it's okay.
Or vote for a new key person and keep it going.
Right, 100%, totally an option.
Yeah.
Could totally be a thing, and and so like one of the things I've done is I've given the contact information for all of my investors and my syndication. So I was like, hey, just so you can all reach each other, just in case.
Yep.
And by the way, here's my insurance person's contact. Here's my lender's contact.
Yeah.
There's a couple others in there as well.
Makes sense.
Just trying to help people make those connections just in case this scenario arises.
Yep.
But as you can see, it's also a lot messier.
Yeah.
Because you're like, ooh, okay, now what?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot messier there. I mean, there's just different options, I guess. And it really does depend on the motivation why someone chose you to do a syndication with. It's like
Yeah.
if they chose you because of who you are, not
Oh,
like
yeah.
I like
It's
this
huge.
company, it's great. Like if you're no longer in the picture, that could change whether they want to stay invested or not there.
Yeah. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I have a separate property management company running it as well. Because it just would have stacked on the key man problem.
Sure. Yep.
But at least with this, day-to-day operations won't stop.
Yeah.
Now it's just a question of, hey, who's going to deposit these checks? And kind of got to go from there.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's comforting to know that there's a plan.
There's a plan.
It's not comforting to think about,
Right?
death happening.
Yeah, I know. But you gotta be worried about these.
Nobody wants to think about that, but it's good to have a plan.
All right, let's talk about the other weird
If you
scenarios.
disappear,
If I disappear.
if you
or
take
just
all the money and
abandon.
leave,
Just go to Mexico, or that doesn't sound like fun. Where would I go? I'm off to Morocco,
Morocco,
Or-
Belize,
Belize. Oh man,
Bali.
beautiful
Ooh,
Belize,
Bali.
Bali. Totally. Yeah. So private money lender situation where that happens is harder, but it's still structured. There's if I as the borrower stop making payments, there's often a time period where I have to catch up, and if I don't, we just move on to foreclosure.
yeah,
Essentially. And that's where the lender, in order to protect their collateral, they're probably going to have to pay the taxes and insurance, which they can add to the debt, but they're not essentially they're going to get the property back if the person just disappears. There's no need for any member votes or anything like that because there's like a lender. Again, it's as if someone says, I'm not interested in this property anymore. They just leave. A lender goes, hey, you stop making payments. They serve notice, go through the foreclosure process, whatever.
Huh.
Yeah. Pretty wild, huh?
That's weird that it's different than you being than the person being dead. You would think it would be the same.
Well, I mean,
Although it's like you're not
to
coming
some
back.
degree,
I guess.
to some degree, it is.
It kind of is.
But the responsibility doesn't move on to the estate.
Sure.
If the estate decides to not do anything with it, exact same process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
There you go.
Let's talk about it from a LP perspective. Okay. This one, honestly, it's just messy, right? The operator just kind of fades away, right? Distributions, let's say that those just stop. Communications stop. There's no formal super event in the operating agreement. So usually there's a vote by the remaining members to remove the manager without cause or potentially with cause. Which could be for fraud or gross negligence or whatever. And there's going to be some percentage of how many people need to vote to switch them out. And it's usually not small. It'll be 80%.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I would think it would just need to be the majority.
It could be. It all depends on how it's
what they
written.
wrote. Yeah.
But you gotta there's a weird balance there because you don't just want to have someone come in and be like, we don't like this guy.
We're gonna overthrow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and there's just some practical things, just like all the other stuff. That means you got to get the other investors on board. You got to get them to coordinate. Someone's got to lead this thing out.
Sure.
It's genuinely messy, which is why it is so important who you invest with, right? We've hounded this over and over and over again. And I'm going to say it again. The operator, the sponsor, that's the thing. The investment vehicle, less important. You are investing in the person because of things like this. If they disappear, you're kind of hosed for a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, for mine, I got a property manager, so day-to-day stuff doesn't stop. But here's the other problem. You're a passive investor. How do you know?
Right.
Until it's
Until
it's been a really long time
too
and I
late.
haven't heard anything. What?
You'd probably be on top of your distributions or
Yeah, maybe.
Things
Well,
like
what
that,
about us?
but-
So we're passive investors in a large, whatever it is. It's 119 units, right? Something like that. 100 and something. Right? We've gotten one distribution check in the year and a half that we've been investors for.
sure. Yeah.
That's
if
it.
it's not a regular thing.
Right. It
it's
was ground up construction, so I didn't expect anything the first year.
Sure.
We got one, which was really a refund from, hey, we didn't spend all the money for construction. Here's your money back.
Yeah.
I might have gotten one more check just from operations, but that's it. If they've decided we don't care about this anymore, how do I know?
You're I was just waiting for the timing. I don't.
It's super messy. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're
interesting.
still around and they're still doing stuff.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean, you could reach out and
Yes,
be like, "Are you guys still around?"
I totally could. Though, for the record, I have sent messages and been totally ignored by them. So I'm also Now there's one guy who, if I send a message to him, he responds.
Yeah.
To which he's usually like, yeah, they're bad at responding. I'm sorry. But which I know, which it's whatever. We're busy. We're doing stuff.
Yeah. Sorry.
But again, like if things are going off the rails, I don't know.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You probably wouldn't know until it was way off the rails and you were like, what in the world? Like this guy's been paid me for 6 months.
Yeah. I drive by the property, I guess. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's pretty crazy. Again,
Weird.
Investing I'm really selling it on this episode. Investing in a syndication as a passive investor, like it's a thing. Like you really got to trust the operator in what they're doing for the project. It's a thing. Okay, kind of related to this is burnout.
Yeah.
So again, and it's especially risky or they just focus on other projects, which is kind of similar, right? They just decide like, man, I'm just tired. I can't do this, or I can't do it to the degree at which I was doing it, maybe, I guess. So private money lender situation again, it's mostly invisible to you as long as the payments keep happening.
Right.
You're like, I don't know, don't care. Payments come in, cool. Until the person stops making payments, in which case, okay, now we're just into that regular default thing. You got your normal cure times. And again, the exposure is limited to the deal, not their state of mind. I think, so you can kind of see the advantages of being a lender, but, and so just because I can hear you in your mind thinking, why would you do anything else but be a lender?
Right.
Is that, can
that's
I feel
kind of,
you
I'm
saying
like,
that?
I feel like that is the best scenario. If anything does go south, you foreclose, you get your money, you're done.
It's a flat fee or a flat rate that you earn, which honestly some investors
maybe
like.
That's good.
But if you're an owner, there's potential to make a lot more. And that's why people...
Which I get, like more risk, more reward. That's typically how it's laid out. So
yeah. And often as a private money lender, you're not necessarily in that first position. You're in a second, third, fourth, whatever. And so there's pluses and minuses. But when things go bad, you want to be a money lender, 100%. Like that's the position. And foreclosing is not exactly like the easiest thing in the world to do. So you got to think it through. Okay, burnout for the limited partner. Okay, and honestly, they said, according to my research, this is the most common failure mode, which I get it because it's not necessarily burnout. It's, I'm moving on to the next project. They give it more like distraction, shiny object.
Okay.
Is probably another way to think
you got
about
this
it.
one going and now you're kind of neglecting it because you're doing other projects.
Yeah, so maybe there's just slower reports to come out. Maybe they're defensive in their updates. There's delayed distributions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And again, there's a spectrum on what burnout equals. It's not like, man, I'm just donezo.
Yeah.
You can have some sort of performance-based removal in the operating agreement that says, hey, if they don't reach this NOI by this percentage for this amount of time, boom, like maybe that, or they have the potential to be out.
Yeah.
And
is it realistic to have clauses like that in there?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would think to a certain extent, because the sponsor should know if they're doing a good job and if they're managing things well, they should be able to read the market and make good, wise decisions and be able to promise like, here is when I'm going to give you distributions and all of that. So they shouldn't get off track, but I would imagine sometimes things happen.
Well, sometimes the investment doesn't go as planned.
Yeah.
Like for example, in Baker Tower, we've got a unit that's vacant. That's just been vacant for a long time. And I think we're actually going to get someone in it, which is super exciting. There's a law firm that's interested in the space, which is fantastic. We just got to finish fixing it. And we were done. And then there was a water leak. And so we're now redoing it. And you're just like that kind of stuff happens. But again, like you expect the person to report, hey, this stuff's happening. Here's what's going on.
So if you just hear nothing and don't get distributions or updates, then that's concerning.
It's concerning. And honestly, it's this weird gray zone where you're like, man, we may not actually be able to do anything about this. It's just kind of a bummer that they're not focused on it anymore. I definitely felt that for the one that we're passively invested in. Where it's like they got the construction stuff done and they're like, cool,
there was momentum.
Because it's a construction company that was doing it all. Like I totally get it. And for the management stuff, they handed off to a property manager. Like, we're moving on to the next project. Here we go. They were like fundraising hard. Us and others.
Yeah.
I was like,
you're like,
dude, you haven't returned any.
I want to get my money back first.
So, whatever. I mean, I get it. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's fine. Okay. Now, what if they're in a lawsuit or like a personal legal crisis? Oh, yeah. That's a great situation to be in.
So messy.
Okay. Private money lender. I bet you can guess what the answer is for that one.
You just
don't care.
Don't care.
Right?
Yeah, you just get your money. Like,
assuming it's with a separate entity.
what does that mean?
So let's say the borrower is that I borrowed it personally from you to go do a deal, and then I personally get sued. Or my LLC borrows the money from you, and then my LLC gets sued.
Okay, I understand.
Now, you might care a little bit more, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
Because you're still like, it's tied to the property.
Sure.
In that situation. So it's kind of a, hey, let's wait and see. And here's what's cool. I think that I wrote this down. I saw this when I was doing my research. I believe that a judgment against me. So I get sued, I lose, I owe someone money. That creates a judgment that says, hey, eventually I have to pay them when money comes in.
Yep.
I believe that is still secondary to the loan.
To your investor.
The loan still has a first position because it was recorded first. That judgment doesn't usually there's exceptions, but it doesn't usually jump the line to the first position.
So I, as the lender, would get my money back first.
Correct. Yeah. So it's kind of a, all right, Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now they could potentially intercept the judgment could potentially intercept distributions. But again, as a lender, I guess it's that same process. Did you make your payments? Yes, we're good. Did you not make your payments? Bummer. Moving on to the next step. It's crazy simple. Oh yeah, there's my note. It was at the very end. Yeah, the deed of trust is senior to most unsecured judgment creditors. Yeah. So yeah, that was being a lender when things go bad is
a good thing.
Kind of the way to be.
Okay.
Now, and again, the converse side is if the project does amazingly well and they make a ton of money, you still make the same amount, which again is totally fine.
It's still fine. That's what you agreed to.
Yeah. Okay. Time for the LP side of things.
This seems like it would get very messy and dramatic, or it could.
So it could potentially, and I will admit, the more I was researching into what happens in these situations, I was like, this is kind of interesting. So because I'm the manager and I have an LLC that's managing it, and it's a single member LLC, potentially if something happens to me, it could impact this other one, even though they are separate entities.
But
this is
and
weird
that's because you're the
because
sole...
we're getting into case law and other weird stuff. Yeah, because I'm the sole owner of
this LLC.
Yeah. The more I've done research on it, it's like if you have a partnership, that's a totally different beast. It is generally treated as a third party, this is not related to you thing. If you are the sole owner of an LLC, again, it's gray area. There's not actually a lot of laws on the book. There's just a few case law, like things have gone to court and the judges made a ruling. And then so people make decisions based off of that judge's ruling. That's kind of like what case law means. And so that is a lot less of a, you're totally cool because it's a separate LLC. If you have multiple LLCs and you're the single owner for all of them, there is a good likelihood that the judge is going to say, you're all just one. This is like, this is just a paper thing. It's not true.
Sure. It's not really.
Now, there's certain things you can do, which is why this becomes gray area. If you've got separate books, separate accounts, separate tools, and like if things are genuinely separate, okay, now you can make the case to say, no, these things they are not the same. But like, let's say, things are shared. You have a shared bank account. That's that's definitely a no-go, right? But that would be one where a judge was like, dude, this is one of the same. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But now what about things where it's like, again, this impacts me. I drive the same car. Now I track my miles in an app and I actually distinguish which entity I'm doing things with. I have the same computer and I use the same browser and some of the same software for stuff.
Yeah.
So it gets...
You don't necessarily have it all split out.
Right. If I wanted to be like super, super good, I would have
separate
two computers, 2 accounts. I use the same email for stuff because it's an awesome email.
Yeah.
But that would be one where it'd be like, no, 100%. Yeah. So that's kind of this is why it's a gray area. Because it's also like, well, a reasonable person you wouldn't use, like you wouldn't have 2 computers. Like it's
right.
not a
That's
thing.
weird.
Because even you,
I mean,
you use your computer for personal stuff and for your job stuff.
I do.
And that's
but I do know
totally
people who
normal.
have a house computer and a work computer because of like security reasons and things.
Totally.
Which
Totally.
makes sense. It's like
Totally.
it has to be separate.
And so that's kind of, it's where, so all that to say, here's the whole point of this is if I were to get sued and it impacted me personally, there's a chance that it could impact me on the legal side. Yeah, potentially.
And it could impact your limited partners.
Only in as much as I may not be able to. It's weird because like distributions would still happen. Their ownership percentage still stays the same. There's just potential that I am no longer capable or able to manage because I got other stuff going on in my life.
If that is the scenario, can you treat it kind of like the disappearance where they're like, we are going to vote somebody else into leadership
because
this guy's not capable of doing it anymore?
Yeah. Trying to think. Yeah, that's essentially, I was trying to think of a scenario, but yeah, I think you nailed it where it's, they would go, I feel like you got too much going on in your life right now, so we're just going to get you out and we're going to bring someone else in. But in theory, like they're still owed their distributions. Now, me as the manager, my distributions might get intercepted by this judgment.
Your own personal.
Which would then impact my enthusiasm for running the project well.
Yeah, because you're not getting paid.
Yeah,
essentially.
Potentially.
But you probably did something dumb and now you're in a legal battle because of that. And you're
Yeah. No, totally.
That's stinky.
You're right.
But right. As a limited partner or a lender, it makes sense to have those different protocols in place. That's like you're protected essentially, and you have options to make changes.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So here's my actionable takeaways for you.
Ready.
Just questions to ask, things to consider. We'll start with the private money lenders. Just confirm that your note is secured by a deed of trust and that it's recorded because then it's tied to the property. And if you have a personal guarantee, is that person creditworthy? It's kind of important. And you just want to make sure to read what triggers a default and what that cure window is. Like when do you get to go, hey, you're in default, and how long does that person get to
what are the timelines
to make it right? And you got your 3 paths to recovery. There's your note enforcement, which is essentially like, dude, come on, you got to pay. There's the deed of trust foreclosure, which means I'm going to take the property back. Or you can go after that guarantee as well. And all those, it's not super easy. They, lawyers and money just get involved, things like that. And you also want to ask, what happens if the borrower entity dissolves?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Often the guarantee survives, but it could potentially cause issues otherwise. So if you're a limited partner in a syndication, before investing, you want to ask, well, what's that succession plan for the key person? Which is a good question that you asked.
Yep.
You really want to read that operating agreement, and you want to ask, like, does it have that key person clause? What's the vote threshold to trigger a replacement? What are the reasons for which you could trigger a replacement? So you want to look for things like that strategic pause or an interim manager, your member votes rights, like those kind of things. Let me think here. And you want to ask that question, who runs this deal if that person can't? Which is kind of that succession type of plan.
Yeah. I know you've talked about this before, and I'm just like blanking on the official term. There's like documents. You probably even said the name of them, and I'm just like, I just don't remember. So there's documents that lay all this out. What is that called?
Yeah, so that's the operating agreement.
The operating agreement.
Now, there's also something called a private placement memorandum.
That's the one I was like, okay, where does that fit in again?
Essentially, that's the thing that says risking in this or investing in this is risky, and here's how it's risky.
Okay.
It's like a full disclosure. And often,
there's like a
usually a huge overlap with the PPM and the operating agreement.
Okay.
Just because the two are going to play together. Because it'll say, hey, if this thing happens, here's the result. And that's where it's pulling from the operating agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they go hand in hand, but you should actually read those.
Yeah. So like your private placement memorandum is going to say, hey, there's a chance that the operator dies. Bummer.
Yeah.
We're going to have key man insurance on this. And your operating agreement says,
here's what the key man insurance is.
We've got key man insurance on this.
Yep.
Yeah. That's what it is. So for both of them, you want to ask, would my capital be safe if the operator had a heart attack tomorrow? And that's a good question. And that's essentially that's the question.
Yeah.
What happens? What happens in these situations? So I thought of this. I don't know where to put it, so I put it in the conclusion, which was a deal doesn't run itself. There's someone who runs it, and that person is often a risk factor.
Yeah.
So you just want to think it through. But a deal doesn't just magically happen. There's someone who makes it happen. And you got to figure out, well, what happens if that person's not around anymore to make it happen?
Sure.
Whew, that was a lot, but
yeah,
that's what it is.
Makes sense.
So there you go. It's just super fun, encouraging, uplifting topic. I think the main takeaway was, being a debt lender is pretty sweet for that downside. Again, it's not a magic bullet. Things don't quickly resolve. It's always slow and messy because messy stuff is happening.
Yeah.
But it's less messy. But you don't share on the upside. So that's kind of the plus and minuses of it all.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And if you're excited to learn about how we handle that kind of situation, I don't know. Just thanks for listening. And if you want to learn more about us and what we offer for investments, you can check us out at furlo.com. So with that, have a great day.